Welcome to Staying Sharp, a joint project of NRTA, AARP's educator community, and the Dana Alliance for Brain Initiatives. I'm Dr. Jordan Grafman, Chief of the Cognitive Neuroscience Section at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke outside of Washington, D.C. I'm also a member of the Dana Alliance for Brain Initiatives, and I'll be your guide as we talk about what to expect from the aging brain and what we can do to stay sharp. Throughout this program, we will be drawing on insights from several top neuroscientists from across the country who, like me, are committed to helping more people know about what happens to our brain as we age and brain-healthy behaviors that we can incorporate into our daily lives. Staying Sharp is a collaboration between NRTA, AARP's educator community, and the Dana Alliance for Brain Initiatives. Funding for some Staying Sharp activities is made possible through the generosity of the MetLife Foundation. As we begin, it's important that we understand what it means to stay sharp. To me, it means taking steps to maintain our brains in order to keep them as healthy as possible and offer protection against disease. Or, as my colleague, Dr. Marilyn Albert says, if we maintain cognitive function over time, then we are more likely to be functionally independent. And we all want that. Let's take a moment to review some important trends that make the concern about staying sharp particularly important today. First, life expectancy is increasing. More and more of us will live longer and potentially have a longer retirement, which may offer more time to travel, spend time with family, or pursue new experiences. And needless to say, we will want to be in good health to enjoy those years. A second important trend is that people are rethinking and redefining the whole notion of retirement. Many will decide to continue their careers or start new ones, either because they want to or because they must for reasons of financial security. Finally, as more of us live longer lives, the prospect of skyrocketing healthcare costs provides an additional incentive to do everything we can to stay healthy for as long as we can. Today, we will cover a number of topics regarding our brain as we age. A particular focus will be on the ability of the brain to change, what we call brain plasticity, and the critical issue of memory. We will end with a discussion of 4 factors that research tells us we can undertake, starting today, regardless of our age, to reduce the risk of age-related diseases and to optimize our chances for maintaining our cognitive abilities. In other words, tips for how we can stay sharp. So let's get started. Until recently, the prevailing scientific wisdom held that the human brain was pretty much fixed early in life. Experts believed that at birth, you had all the neurons you were ever going to have, and as you aged, more and more of those brain cells were discarded. But we now know that the brain changes throughout life and that new nerve cells develop into later life. Our brain cells, called neurons, actually change in response to what we experience. They can grow or shrink depending upon whether or not they are stimulated. This is called neuroplasticity. Let's take a moment to listen to Dr. Guy McCann, a neuroscientist from Johns Hopkins University, who spoke at a Staying Sharp forum as he describes neuroplasticity and how this discovery has added to our understanding of the brain.
I've been teaching medical students for a long, long time. And about half of what I taught them was wrong. And 2 things that relate to what Marilyn just said is, one was the idea that you were born with all the nerve cells you were ever going to have, and that you were going to gradually lose them as you got older. That is not true. We make new nerve cells, and we make new nerve cells that are particularly in that area of the hippocampus. So one of the findings that came out of Maryland's studies of the effect of physical activity, in experimental animals, those who are physically active actually make more new nerve cells in the hippocampus. So there's a real positive effect there. The other idea we had was that the brain was hardwired. But it isn't. Your brains are constantly changing. And your brain is different than your brain is different than your brain because of your previous experiences and what you did. And it keeps changing all through life, much more so in little kids, but it continues even in adults. And that's why we think, at least, that this idea of being mentally active means that you're making new connections, reinforcing old ones. All the things that you did as you were learning very actively as a little child, you're now recreating, if you will, as you get older.
Dr. McCann offered us some good news with his message that even into old age, the brain continues to change and fine-tune itself in response to new experiences. As you heard, our brain can make new nerve cells when exposed to new experiences. These new nerve cells are created in the part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is significant because the hippocampus plays a vital role in memory and learning. And speaking of learning, there has been a persistent question about whether an older person can learn as well as a younger person. That question was posed to Dr. Albert, who is also with Johns Hopkins University, when she spoke at a Staying Sharp forum. Let's listen to what she has to say about an older person's ability to learn.
What seems to be pretty clear is that on average, as people get older, it takes them longer to learn something new. And if you give an older person the same amount of time to learn something new as you give a younger person, on average, an older person will not learn as much of it. But it's not that an older person is forgetting more quickly, it's that it's taking them longer to learn. And if they learn something well, they actually remember it as well as people many decades younger than themselves. So it's a very important thing to learn, that you might have to put a little bit more effort in at the front end, but once you've put in that effort, then assuming that you're normal, you should be able to remember it as well as people many decades younger. And particularly now in this age when electronics are changing and all kinds of new things are coming about and we're feeling very overwhelmed with new information, what that says is that older people can learn and retain things exceedingly well if they're willing to put in the effort.
So we have some very good news about the mature brain. Earlier we described brain plasticity that occurs throughout life, and we just heard how, with a little more effort and focus, we are able to continue to learn and remember as we age. We also know that once we reach a certain age, concerns about remembering and forgetting often take on greater significance. In spite of the fact that memory lapses are experienced by young and old, we begin to worry more about memory issues or lapses as we age. So let's differentiate what is normal memory lapse and what is not. As you'll hear in the next video clip, Dr. Albert helps us understand when memory lapses can be considered a normal part of the aging process and when a lapse might pose concern.
I often talk about the aha experience. So we all forget things. I'm infamous for putting my glasses down and not being able to find them. Sometimes if I'm not paying attention, I don't remember where I parked my car. But at least until now, when I find that thing, I have this sense of recollection. That's why I say, aha, I remember. Oh yes, I remember. I came in the house and I put my glasses down because the phone was ringing and it's not in the usual place and that's where they are. So it's the absence of that that should cause concern. And what you see in people who are having trouble is that when they forget something and you remind them, it doesn't bring it back to mind. They don't have that sense of recollection. And that's the thing that should give us some concern.
There are times, however, when we need to pay attention to memory lapses. Clearly, we need to take some action if memory loss is disrupting our daily lives, if we are unable to carry out daily functions that used to be routine. Consider this. It is quite normal to forget where you parked your car at the store. It is not normal to forget that you drove it there. Not remembering that we have forgotten something is also a memory loss of some concern, and one that is more often recognized by a spouse or loved one. We also worry when memory loss persists. In all of these cases, it is important to check with a professional to determine the cause. It is important to note that some serious memory issues are treatable. Let's turn again to hear from Dr. Albert.
Some of the things that cause really severe changes in memory are things that are treatable. They're not all things that are untreatable, and it's very important to identify them. So sometimes it's a severe mood problem. You mentioned depression before. Sometimes when people are really depressed, they have trouble with memory. That's a very treatable problem, depression, so the doctor can handle that. Sometimes people have a vitamin deficiency. Sometimes they have something wrong with thyroid, for example. Sometimes they might have something in their brain that can be treated. So a really good doctor would evaluate all of those things and would see whether or not there were treatable causes of memory decline.
As you have heard, in both the young and old, there are a number of external factors that can cause day-to-day memory difficulties. For example, your memory can be affected if you are under stress, aren't getting enough sleep, or are suffering from serious depression. A vitamin deficiency, or even the medications you take, can affect memory. Sharing these issues with your doctor can help you get treatment that might improve your memory. Let's listen as Dr. McCann describes a visit to a memory specialist.
So let's say you come in and you're worried about your memory. And your wife says, you know, he keeps asking me the same question. And I give him the answer. But he asks it again and 2 hours later. Well, that worries you because he's not remembering this new information that's coming in. So the first thing that someone like Marilyn does is a series of neuropsychology tests which matches you against people your age and education. So we have a pretty good idea how well you should function. And that gives us a very good clue. The other thing it gives us is a baseline. So if we're not sure, we'll see you 6 months later and say, gee, this guy's having real trouble here. Or he may be exactly the same or even better. So this is first to see where you are, but to give us that baseline for further evaluation. And then the other things we do are the things that Marilyn mentioned, including looking at your brain with imaging, because some of the things we're looking for we'll see with imaging one way or the other. So there's kind of a pattern of things we do trying to sort this out.
The key point is that if you are concerned about yourself or a loved one, seek medical help. As you have learned, there are some instances where memory lapses are treatable. We should not think that loss of memory is an inevitable part of the aging process. Of course, it is understandable that people become concerned about memory lapses, especially as it may mean the beginning of more serious conditions such as dementia. Dementia is a general term that simply means there is a decline in multiple mental abilities, and there are many disorders that can cause dementia, as noted on the screen. However, about 2/3 of the cases of dementia are believed to be attributable to Alzheimer's disease. Although there are many types of dementia, the most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. Today we hear more about Alzheimer's, and that is due in part to the expanding older segment of our population. Age is a major risk for Alzheimer's. Therefore, older people are the most likely to be affected by the disease. We are also seeing earlier clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. The good news about earlier diagnosis is that it means that treatment begins earlier, and that may make a significant difference in a patient's quality of life. Unfortunately, a definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is only possible during examination of the brain during autopsy. Therefore, clinical diagnosis is achieved through the process of eliminating other potential causes. We believe that the disease is progressive and irreversible, but clinical trials and treatment approaches now underway offer signs of hope. Let's listen to another of my neuroscience colleagues, Dr. Risa Sperling of Harvard University, to hear her thoughts about when we might find a cure for Alzheimer's.
I've publicly said that I think the cure to Alzheimer's disease is in someone's test tube, and I do. I'm not sure whether it will be the currently tested drugs, which are primarily based on this protein called amyloid, and I'm happy to talk more about that, or other abnormal proteins or neuroprotection. But I think there's a lot of really promising work at the laboratory. And what it's going to take to actually translate into clinical care improvement is clinical research, proving that these drugs actually work in trials.
As you heard Dr. Sperling say, We are on the cusp of finding effective treatments and possibly a cure for Alzheimer's disease. Clinical trials are an essential part of the puzzle, and you can help scientists find a cure by volunteering for trials. Trials are run by teams of expert doctors, and they rely on volunteers, both healthy and ailing. As you might suspect, clinical trial patients may be among the first to receive promising new drugs before they become available to the broader community. Regardless of the success of the trial, your participation will help future generations. Let's turn our attention to staying sharp and what you can do. We are entering a new era with increased awareness of how lifestyle and personal behavior may affect both brain health and successful aging. It is becoming increasingly clear that certain types of behaviors may offer protection against cognitive decline. Research studies in many countries have identified 4 key factors that may predict maintenance of cognitive function. They are increased mental activity, increased physical activity, increased social activity, and control of vascular risk and stress. Let's explore each of these factors. Let's first discuss mental activity. Studies have shown that staying mentally active throughout life or exercising your brain may strengthen our brain. As we learn with plasticity, our brain is stimulated and grows when we learn new things or pursue intellectually stimulating activities. Dr. Albert has some thoughts on the benefits of staying mentally active.
The evidence suggests that if you're more mentally active, it's good for you. Originally, the finding had to do with levels of education, so people who were better educated appeared to maintain mental ability more. Now we realize that what that means is that people who have education are more likely to be mentally active throughout their life. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be reading a book, going to a concert, playing board games, going to a lecture sponsored by AARP. Going to the Staying Sharp program. Anything that is mentally stimulating, and we think that that's because you're making more connections in the brain. And those connections are protecting it when it gets into trouble and giving you the ability to solve problems and learn things by different pathways.
What would give you a good mental workout? I suggest you look for those things that challenge your thinking, offer enjoyment, and encourage you to grapple with new and complex ideas. A good mental workout exercises a variety of thinking skills. For example, chess might improve strategic thinking, while a lively discussion may draw on a broader range of skills that exercise the whole brain. What's most important is that you find activities that are both enjoyable and stimulating so that you stay engaged and continue to do them. The goal is to make a mental exercise workout part of your everyday life. At this point, let's pause to talk about a new line of products that are emerging from the growing industry of successful aging. Many companies are promoting products and services that promise to delay the aging process or to improve memory and increase brain power. This industry responds to our fears about aging and cognitive decline. It may be that some products and services will prove helpful, but I encourage you to be cautious about using them and examine their claims carefully. Consulting your physician or another professional may also be useful, and becoming an educated and informed consumer is vital before making an investment of your time or money. The second key factor of a brain-healthy lifestyle is increased physical activity. This doesn't mean you need to become a marathon runner. In fact, you don't even need to join an expensive health club. Let's hear again from Dr. Albert.
One of the things we should talk about first is physical activity. So the big surprise in all of these studies was that being physically active is just as important probably as being mentally active. And we didn't understand it very well. Now we know, or we think we know from looking at animals, where people have looked at animals that are more physically active and looked at their mental function, that being physically active actually changes chemicals in your brain that helps to repair and to protect it. And so that's one of the reasons that we think it's so important to do both mental and physical activity and social engagement.
Physical exercise has many benefits, and studies have shown that exercise regimens that are 4 to 5 times a week and for 30 minutes or more are good for both your heart and your brain. Regular exercise can also help lower blood pressure and cholesterol levels and can help reduce anxiety and stress and improve sleep. So start by moving more every day, even in small ways, and work toward increasing the time you spend exercising. Just as with your efforts to increase mental stimulation, find a physical activity you enjoy. You might also find ways to sneak in additional physical activity by doing little things like parking your car on a shopping trip just a little further away from a store entrance. Those few extra steps are good for you. The third of our 4 key factors for brain-healthy behaviors is increased social engagement. Studies suggest that people with good social networks live longer and are physically healthier than people who are socially isolated. Why is that? It seems that feeling a sense of effectiveness in the world and feeling that we have control over our lives, including feeling that we contribute to our families and to our society, may be one of the predictors of maintenance of cognitive ability. Studies have found that people with good social networks live longer and are physically healthier than people who are socially isolated. Nothing we do is quite as stimulating and challenging as interacting with other people, and these stimulating interactions often add meaning and purpose to our lives, especially through volunteering for a cause in which you believe. And don't forget animal companionship. Furry and feathered friends can bring great joy and purpose into our lives. We have now explored 3 of the 4 factors for brain-healthy behaviors: increased mental activity, physical activity, and social engagement. The 4th factor has 2 dimensions: managing vascular health and managing stress. Vascular health refers to the various factors that affect the flow of blood throughout the body. Anything that reduces the effectiveness of the heart to pump blood or of the arteries to deliver the blood to the brain can impair brain function. Stress also has an interesting dynamic between body and brain. Some level of stress is good. It motivates us, it moves us to action. But too much stress, chronic or continual, can be harmful. Let's explore some tips for managing our vascular health. A common phrase among neuroscientists is that what's good for your heart is good for your brain. That's why I encourage you to be aware of your heart, since the presence of multiple vascular risks over a long period of time could increase cognitive decline. Because the risk of heart disease increases with age, it becomes even more important to work with your doctor to identify and manage risk factors. For example, if you smoke, quit. Smoking makes you more likely to suffer a heart attack and puts you at a much higher risk for developing blood clots and strokes. If you are overweight, work to take off those extra pounds, as weight can raise your blood pressure, cholesterol, and increase your risk of developing diabetes. Have your cholesterol level checked periodically, and if it's high, be prepared to take action, either through diet and exercise or medication. The same goes for blood pressure, as it too can generally be managed with attention and effort. And finally, it is extremely important that you tell your doctors about all of the medications you are taking, including prescriptions from other doctors, over-the-counter medicines, and even your daily vitamin or supplements. It is not uncommon for a person to consume a mix of medications and supplements, which can be a dangerous practice. Some medications or supplements counteract the effect of others, or even interact in negative ways. This topic was addressed at a Staying Sharp forum by Dr. Ramona Hopkins of Brigham Young University.
I think one of the important things when you're filling prescription medication that you use one pharmacy so that you're not getting your pills a whole bunch of different places, because I can't remember who at dinner said last night that we have a doctor for every different body part. And the problem with that is they don't necessarily talk to each other. So one doctor gives you a prescription for your heart, and another one gives you a prescription for something else, and they don't know whether those 2 prescriptions counteract each other, which is in many cases what happens, or maybe cause side effects if given together. And so if you're getting your medications at one pharmacist and your pharmacist sees them all come up on their computer screen, they can say, wait a minute, you shouldn't be taking that. Also make sure as you go to these different specialists that you take a list of all the medications you're on. And I find it very helpful if you just have a list in your purse that you can give them instead of trying to remember them and what the dose is and how often you take it. Then they know what you're on, and hopefully it will reduce the probability that you're given medicine that doesn't go together.
We have now briefly explored the 4 brain-healthy behaviors that contribute to successful aging: increased mental activity, increased physical activity, increased social engagement, and managing vascular health and stress. There are a number of ways that you can help improve your memory. To begin, you will need to pay attention to the information that you want to remember. This may sound like common sense, but we've already talked about how the aging brain may take a little longer to learn new information. Concentration can be key, and avoiding distractions will help you learn and remember. Next, avoid multitasking. It is far better to concentrate on one thing at a time, since our brains really can only do one thing at a time. Also, write down and verbally repeat important things to remember. It's also helpful to take mental notes through the day to help you remember. For example, when you park your car at the mall, note what store is close by so that you can recall where you parked your car more easily. I also recommend that you put everyday items in the same place so that they are easier to find, like hanging your keys on the same hook in the kitchen every time you come in. This will cut down on those stressful and frantic searches. And last, relax. Tension and stress are associated with memory lapses, and managing stress can help improve memory. The best approach to helping our brains stay sharp is to live a brain-healthy life that incorporates mental and physical activity, along with being socially engaged and taking care of our heart. Let's bring this session to a close with advice from Dr. Albert on a particular activity that brings all of this together.
I think the story that Annette would like me to tell is that years ago I was trying to think of the one activity that we all do that combines all of this: mental activity, physical activity, and social engagement. And the conclusion that I came to was the best thing to do was to shop. This conclusion was stimulated by my mother-in-law, who loves to shop and as a result shops every day. And she walks great distances carrying a very heavy bag, so she's physically active. She spends a very long time debating and trying to figure out which is the bargain, which is the thing she should buy. So she's mentally active. And when she's finished, she feels really good about herself.
Thank you for joining me for this Staying Sharp session. If you would like more information on ways to help your brain stay sharp, or to download copies of the special Staying Sharp booklets, please visit www.aarp.org/NRTA or www.dana.org. On behalf of NRTA, AARP's educator community, and the Dana Alliance for Brain Initiatives, thank you for listening, and stay sharp.